Okay, so some of you know that I placed a High Court claim against Jacinda Ardern, James Shaw, and the Labour Green Government Alliance for their mass 1080 drops, where they are doubling the dose this year. And doubling the intensity of the doses that they're dropping. So last year they dropped enough 1080 across the bush and waterways and natural ecosystems of New Zealand to kill 50 million men. Now, whilst that gets diluted as it travels through the waterways, the rivers and streams to our agriculture water supply and our town water supplies, the fact is that New Zealand has a health epidemic at the moment for a reason. We're number one in the world for sterility, number one for depression, which leads to number one in the developed world for suicides. We're number one for cancers. Every week in the newspaper, they seem to be talking about a different phenomenon, anomaly of a cancer that we have here. Today's was a special kind of brain cancer. There's bowel cancer articles all the time. I often joke that has something to do with the amount of shit being talked in Parliament. But it's definitely primarily caused by the only addition to our ecosystem that is capable to cause this sort of complete breakdown in human health and the health of our animals, which, bogus bovis is another story. But I've just realised that I've just been told tonight that despite the August hearing being scheduled for the court to hear the claim on how the fact that 1080 is flowing is a chemical weapons grade poison, and it's flowing through our waterways into our drinking water supply, and that is going to logically cause health effects, but there's evidence to substantiate that as well. But whilst that hearing is due for August, and I had hoped that all drops in between times would be set aside. It's now apparent that I need to make an interim application to stop the 1080 drops of mass poisoning of New Zealand's waterways. And let's get this straight. When you get 1080 poisoning, it's like plague-like symptoms. It's an agonizing way to die, okay? It's like an acid attack inside your body. Animals bite off their own tongue. They rip out their own stomachs with their own teeth. They writhe on the ground. They have pus and blood coming out their eyes and ears and everywhere else. This is they take 7 to 12 hours to die if they have eat a pellet. But if they're drinking it through the waterways, then they're dying this horrible, agonizing death over weeks or months if they're bigger animals, especially. This is a terrible, terrible, treacherous crime. We have laws that protect animals' right to life. We also have laws that protect humans' right to life. The fact is that you can't drop enough 1080 to kill 50 million people in the waterways that feed into your entire water supply and expect that you would live as a population, that you would survive beyond 2050 at this rate, now that the next lot of drops they're planning over the winter will increase the dosage. Now, and it's not just the human tragedy or the animal tragedy. They, on this occasion, because they're poisoning across the southern Alps of New Zealand, the three rivers, the Whaturoa, the Perth, and the Wanganui, their streams and waterways all travel into the Franz Josef Glacier. That's one of the world's works of art, of nature, and they're poisoning it. What a crime! It's amazing. The New Zealand government, Jacinda Ardern, who campaigned on, we need swimmable rivers, but wait, just let me poison them a little bit more and then go swimming, please, because that will just help the extermination program along a lot faster. Just kill two birds with one stone, or the entire population. This is serious. If you eat a teaspoon of 1080 by yourself, you probably explode alive. If you share it with 100 men, you're all dead. You put enough 1080 in the waterways of New Zealand to kill 50 million people year after year, doubling the dose, increasing the intensity of the double doses. No wonder Pol Pot's planning mass new build of housing in the major cities of New Zealand. This is an extermination program that will see the New Zealand countryside coming into a wilderness, the 80% wilderness. Oh, sounds familiar. UN 21 Agenda 21 plan. I mean, I've travelled around the world and I've gone to parks where there's plaques that say that our population should be dramatically reduced. Well, I tell you what, Rotorua Island is absolutely an example of New Zealand bird sanctuary planned by this little elite cabal who are administering a mass takeover, a privatisation of this country, and a deliberate poisoning of the population. It's terrifying. Now, I've tried not to record a video for a while because it takes too much time of my time in the comments, but I just discovered this amazing tool where you can call literally every possible word a profanity and then no one can comment. So now I get to record a video and be free of all your words. Because that's the other thing, and I do talk in poetry a little bit these days. I'm just sort of inspired to write a new biblical epic, given the fact that we're all facing the end of times by technology warfare that a certain group of people are inflicting deliberately on the populations of the world. I mean, what's happening in New Zealand? It's funny that I've had an International Criminal Court argument on Syria and the absolutely sort of despicable exhibits of human nature that are being arranged by the UK government, by the American government, by the French government, and these leaders who are portrayed on our mass media, which is primarily owned by a few people, to be reputable and trustworthy. But they finance terrorists to rape and slaughter innocent civilians right across Syria. And these same sort of people who back those leaders are involved with this tyranny here. A mass extermination of a population, devastation of their health, mass torture of animals right across the bush. Look, poison doesn't have a cognitive function, okay? Let's get that right. It doesn't know to target possums and not pigs, or, possums and not people. It targets everything that lives. It targets mammals. It's a hormone disruptor, We've got a pregnant Prime Minister allowing this mass poisoning of our ecosystem. Well, there's a town called Whaturoa and there's a town called Harihari, and they have populations, 1,300 people, 400 people, children galore, okay? And probably a lot of women who are pregnant right now. Well, you drop 1080 everywhere and they breathe in that dust. Miscarriages galore. This has happened to community after community in New Zealand. 1080 is dropped and there's a mass of miscarriages for months afterwards. This is an absolute crime of epic proportions. And I had an affidavit written the other day, and I won't go into the detail because it's before the court, but at the end of the day, politicians in New Zealand are completely complicit in this. There's a lot of them. So I don't know the indoctrination if they promise you a part of the, singularity, bit of a chip, bit of a hospital visit under the guise of, mental distress, or a heart operation, and chip you up and suddenly you're immortal. And you're willing to exterminate your population, because that's pretty much as credible as it gets right now. Anyway, I start to digress to my poetry line of speaking. I don't want to record a 20-minute video this time, but I just want to say, people in New Zealand are very trusting, and we're a population very trusting of our government. We are just trusting, So the fact that there is a private group here with an agenda, it's a global agenda, a redesign, it's a privatization of countries through mass deception and really criminal methods of taking power and control, and structural reform, crisis narratives to achieve structural reform. That's happening, and you never think it will happen to you, like New Zealand, like I've seen it happen in Japan and Indonesia and the rainforest and everywhere, but you just never think it will happen to you. I don't know if it's this sort of Western arrogance, I'm not sure. Anyway, it's happening here, okay? Grand scale happening here. Half the people are getting cancer because the addition to the ecosystem is a chemical weapons grade poison. Let's be clear, this is very logical. And if you put that in the waterways of all your animals, or if you tramp enough through the calf's milk or feedstock, your animals will have the same symptoms of the animals dying in the bush, plague-like symptoms, massive swelling of joints, massive edema, massive liquids, excessive liquids, as I've said before, pus out the eyes and ears, writhing in pain. The lymph nodes infected with bacteria, so it will give the impression of, mastitis and arthritis. But this is the symptom of 1080 poisoning. And as I said, last year alone, there was enough 1080 poisoning dropped in our waterways to kill 50 million people. I mean, this is just beyond a crime. It's beyond a crime. Anyway, look, the legal action is with the court. The case is with the court. It is obviously necessary. I would have thought not necessary to apply for an interim order, which I was given the option to do. But I just felt that because it is incumbent upon the court, in fact, incumbent upon the government to protect the population from chemical weapons grade poisoning in their water supply, which helicopter pilots on many accounts are dropping directly in town water supplies, directly in people's water supplies. In fact, one person said, "Look, I'm really worried because the last time you flew over my property, you dropped 1080 in my water supply." So they said, "Okay, well, next time put a big blue tarpaulin over your water area and we'll avoid it." Well, they dropped masses of 1080 pellets on that blue tarpaulin. I mean, these guys are sadists, and it's happening here in good old pure New Zealand. Now, I just want to say, on a positive note, I did a 3-year development to transition New Zealand to clean agriculture years ago, and I left it. I went overseas, but actually it was sabotaged, and now I understand why, because the people in the dairy industry, or crafting the dairy industry to be finished in 20 years, according to Richard Branson, which is not going to happen voluntarily, is it? Farmers are not going to give up their farms and stop farming. So if you're going to finish completely dairy and beef and sheep within 20 years, then you might need a few crisis narratives that force the slaughter of healthy herds all over the country, and then force the farmers to abandon their farms and move to the countryside, or have your standing army, which MPI now have, civil military force army across agriculture, not farm advisors, not ex-vets, they're military, ex-military trained forces going on and intimidating farmers all over the country, putting them on gag orders, not giving them compensation, because for their slaughtering of their healthy herds, based on the bogus narrative of the fact that some herds were affected by 1080 poisoning. Clear cut. They are capable of, if farmers don't hand in their keys voluntarily because they're terrified, this standing army by 2030 will have all the farmers forcibly transferred to the city. That's my prediction. Honestly, because that's where the trajectory goes. You have to follow it step by step. That's where it ends up. There's nowhere else that this is going. Mass 1080 drops right across agriculture. Areas of New Zealand or bush that leads into agriculture will finish agriculture, just like it will traumatise and devastate the health of New Zealanders everywhere, until we're all dying of something and very sterile, because that's what 1080 does, and we're already sterile. How many cows were empty this year? How many cows were sterile this year? That's not an accident. That's called 1080 trace poisoning through the water system. Now they're going to up the dose. Now it's not going to be 1080 trace poisoning that makes sterility and, breaks down the cell wall so that penicillin can't work, so the animals not only get really terribly sick but suffer an agonizing death. What kind of sadists the private group of people? If you wanted to exterminate, I get it, EMF rays, use them. It's much more efficient if you want to exterminate the entire population. Or you could just put those new cow collars on the cows and just give them a bit of a buzz overnight. And suddenly there's this natural phenomenon in New Zealand where all the cows died overnight. Well, then Richard Branson gets his way, doesn't it? End of the dairy industry. Great. Come on. This stuff is really, really sick. Anyway. I want to now say something positive. The fact is that if this poisoning is stopped now, this year, if my case is successful, or any of the other ways that I am trying to encourage this to be stopped is successful, this country can heal. It will take a hit. We will need a second reserve bank in an independent city-state so that we can extend enough money supplies for the farmers to survive this. And then we're lucky we have the smartest farmers in the world in New Zealand because they can heal and transition the agriculture industry to a completely sustainable model which would allow us to supply the highest quality food in the world. We could redesign what we supplied away from industrial farming, but there needs to be a way to finance that, and it's certainly not coming from the IMF, who are waiting to devastate us and lump us with trillion-dollar loans because Cindy doesn't know how an economy works and she's promoting that we're running out of money when she can generate as many credits in the reserve accounts as she wants tomorrow. She just doesn't seem to know that. My God. Anyway, the point is, I don't want to be joking. I always get jokey on video. I'm actually quite serious, which is why I don't really record that many videos, because I appear to be unserious. I'm very serious. But the point is that it is going to be essential that we have a secondary form of currency to finance farmers out of what is going to be a devastation when people around the world understand that our product has been contaminated with 1080 poisoning everywhere. There's no question that we have to own up to this crime, or as this terribly criminal group plan, we will be poisoning people all over the world and helping them become sterile as well. They will have the same problem as us, although I expect we will remain number one alongside Australia, who are also having 1080 dropped all over their waterways right now, especially the watersheds. Okay, but I want to go back to the positive. We can heal from this, okay? We have to own it. We have to admit it. We have to be prepared to finance our way out of it with a local currency, with people who know how to run an economy, which the current government does not. Okay, we cannot run out of money. We can generate enough money to survive this. And as a result, we can heal the animals, we can heal the earth that has been devastatingly poisoned. And we could become the purest food source in the world, which is what we should be. Okay, so this is something we need to own and fix and stop. But people need to stop the cognitive dissonance and wake up to what is going on, because your children are being poisoned. That is a non-negotiable fact, given the quantities of poison that is being dropped in the water that they drink. Okay, so this is much longer than I hoped, but anyway, okay. The point is that, probably just to end, is that the drops that are planned for the Whaturoa and the Perth and the Wanganui rivers should be stopped. They should not go ahead. The pre-feed's been dropped, which is a sadistic thing to do, like flavoured pellets, so that the animals learn to trust the pellets, and then when they eat them with the poisoning, they die a 7 to 12 hour, at least, agonising, devastating death. Predator-free is human-free 2050. We cannot survive this level of poisoning. Okay. See you.